All right, so you should have access to Excel through Office 365. You get your email through Outlook, and so I'm assuming that you have access to the Microsoft Office suite. You may have like Google Sheets or something like that. It should basically do the same thing, but everything that I'm doing in Excel. So the first thing we want to do is go and look at our go and look at the assignment. And so I'm going to treat this section more as a how-to, because the rest of the actual statistics and math of it is pretty straightforward. So if you'll notice on problem number 1, there's a scatter plot. And it's asking you to do a scatter plot. So it says data file scatter, and it's a live link. So if you click that, you'll notice I've been doing it in the background. So there you go. At the bottom of the screen, you'll see that I've downloaded it 3 times at this point. So I'm just going to go ahead and open it. And when I open it, it's going to magically populate. And the first thing that I need to do is enable editing. So I think you can see that. I'm actually going to minimize this just a little bit. So I'm going to drag you over here. Hang on, drag I said. All right, so I'm going to drag you over here because I think my window is slightly restricted. So I'm going to look at this, and my observations, there's 20 of them. Okay, there are 20 observations. So the first thing I want to do is hit enable editing. So I've got 2 Excel windows open just in case you can see the one in the background. What I want to do at this point is look and see what I can do with this information. So it says I got observations 1 through 20. It gives me variable X and variable Y, and I'm going to go ahead and just highlight. And so I'm going to single click and just keep dragging, okay, and highlight both of these sets of data. And then from there, it's going to say, okay, fine, what do you want to do? So what I would like to do is input a chart. So you can play around up here, and if you hit insert, we want to insert some charts. And so since question number 1 says to use a scatter plot, what I would like to do is if you click on this, it'll say insert an XY or a bubble chart, whatever. But if you hit the little arrow, it'll give you options. So I'm going to do a scatter plot. And it takes my data, and it's whatever's in the first column I highlighted will be your horizontal axis, which is my X's. And whatever is going to be on the vertical axis is going to be the second column I highlighted, which is my Y's. Now, there's a slightly difficult thing in that my dimensions are different than the dimensions on WebAssign. So you'll notice that my x-axis goes from -50 to +40. And when I look at WebAssign, my dimensions for my scatter plots go from -40 to 40. Okay, -40 to 40. So regardless of where I go. So you need to understand that's going to affect a little bit on how you interpret your graph. Now the next thing I notice is that for this particular graph, I've got kind of like a clump, and it looks like it's going downwards. And what you'll find out later on in chapter 15 is that it's kind of fun to play with how close to a line this gets. So I'm looking at this, and if you remember from algebra, as I read this graph from left to right, that blop of dots is going in a downward motion. So there is a negative, because it's downwards, there's a negative relationship between my X's and Y's. There's a negative relationship between my X's and Y's. So as we go back over here and start looking, well, this top one has a very, very positive relationship. And do you see it's almost a it's almost a dead on line. And that's, again, something we're going to learn in chapter 15. When we come down here, that's still a positive relationship, but it's pretty scattered, hence the name scatter plot. Okay, C is going to be a downward line, and then if you'll notice, D is just all over the map. Okay, there's nothing. It looks like buckshot. So what we're looking for is option C on there, and then it's going to say, what's your relationship? Well, it's a negative correlation. Okay, so as I have very, very high values on Y, they're very, very low values on X. Okay, so great values on Y correspond with low values on X. So in this case, there's a negative relationship, because as Y decreases, in other words, as I go down, X is going to increase. In other words, I will go right. Okay, so let's play with this a little bit more. What happens if I grab, I'm just going to go in here, I'm going to pause you for a second, and I'm going to use a different data set. I'm just going to make everything positive, okay, because we want to look at some percentages. So for this problem, we're looking at a comparison chart, and I don't have a data file to download, so literally what I did was I just took my cursor and I highlighted that much, and then I hit Control C to copy it, and then I came over to Excel and I hit Control V, V is in Victor, which pasted it. Okay, and notice I'm in A1, B1, so I'm in the first 5 rows and the first 3 columns. So what I would like to do at this point is create a side-by-side bar chart. And by default, it's going to think that whatever is in the first column is your horizontal axis, just like it did on the last one. Well, then B and C must be vertical axes, so it should know. It should know what you want. You just got to tell it. So I'm going to highlight A1 and keep my finger there, and I'm going to just highlight that entire table. And I'm going to come up here, and you'll notice you've got a histogram, which is not what we're looking for. We're looking for bar charts. So if you have a column or a bar chart, I'm going to drop this thing down, and I want a 2D column chart, 2-dimensional. If you want it to be kind of cool looking, you can do a 3D, but that's not really what it's asking for. It just makes it look kind of cool. So if you'll notice, for A, underneath option 1, which is going to be blue, it's right at 100. Now, I don't know if you can tell, but it's just hard to see that. So I'm going to come back up and I'm going to change it back to a 2D. There we go. Now it's easier to see. So this one is at 163. But it looks like about 150. This one is just over 800. So now we can see this comparison. So we obviously know just from the picture that that type 1, whatever type 1 is, has a whole lot less frequency. It occurs a whole lot less. There's a whole lot less number of them. Whatever we're measuring, there's a whole lot less of it than there is of option 2. So coming back here, it's going to ask what it is. So now I can see, well, A is 1 and A is 1, which in this case is blue. And then type 2 is green. Well, my type 2 was orange. Okay, so come on back over here. I want that second column to be awfully tall. So what you're looking for now is obviously going to be this one. Okay, so it says in group A, the bar labeled 1 is 163 and the bar labeled 2 is 837. So that's a pop-up that you can read what it means. So what does that mean? What's your relationship between X and Y? As X is going from categorical A, B, C, D, then what is Y doing? What's the next type doing? So we have the frequency for 1. What is the blue doing? Come back up here. Tell me what blue is doing. Blue is growing. Blue is growing. So he is increasing. Okay. Come on back up here. What is green doing? Green is going to be decreasing. So we're going to come back here, and what's the frequency? It decreases. Okay. It is lessening in its value. All right. So what else have we got? In the following cross tabulation, which is what we did in 2.3. It summarizes the data for 2 categorical variables X and Y. The variable X can go from low, medium, and high, and variable Y can take on values of yes or no. So you want to do the row percentages. So looking at your first option, in yes, low, you've got 25. In yes, or in low, no, you've got 5, and your total is 30. So I'm going across. So for this one, you're going to want to do 25 divided by 30, and then multiply that by 100, and you want 3 decimal places. And then you do 5 divided by 30 times 100, round to 3 decimal places. Okay, so we can fill out that table. Now it says construct a stat percent frequency bar chart with X on the horizontal axis. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and fill this in, and I'm going to come back. And since I've got the data on an Excel sheet, I'm going to go ahead and do the percentages real quick too. All right, so what we're going to do is make that go away. Okay, so I went ahead and filled in all the data. And if you're familiar with, if you've had a computer class, that's going to be the best thing in the world. Because all I did, you'll notice that this is your input bar up here. So I just typed a 25 and I just typed a 5. But then what I told it to do was take the sum of cell B2 and C2. So it added it up for me, which means if I wanted to, I could change that to a 6 and it'll change. I don't want that to be a 6, so I'm putting it back. But it'll change for me. It'll do the work for me, so I don't have to keep entering, doing all this hard work by myself. Okay? I'm making the software work for me. Now, I'm not going to do that all the time simply because this isn't a computer class, so you need to be able to see how to do it as well. So when I computed the percentages, if you'll notice, I did not use a formula or anything. I literally just told it. So if you want it to do the math, you have to type an equal sign. And then I said do 25 divided by 30. So there's my 25 divided by 30 times 100. And I got that answer. Well, it got the answer for me. When we're doing this stat chart, I want to go ahead and highlight those 3 rows and those 3 columns. I don't want the totals in there. I do not want the totals in there. So again, when we go to look at a chart, I'm going to go to Insert, and I'm going to go to Bar Charts. So Excel says if it's going horizontally, it's a bar chart. If it's going vertically, it's a column chart. They're being really specific. We just call them bar graphs. Okay. So I want this type. I want a stacked column, so I'm comparing parts of a whole. Well, what's the difference? Compare the percentages that each value contributes to a total. We don't want that. We want this one. Okay. So if you'll notice now, it says that Series 1 is blue. So 83.33 is this part of the low portion. And Series 2, which is the second piece of data, is going to be 16.6. So that's this little part up here. And then look at the magic. All of it adds up to 100. So when we flip on back over here to the questions, we're looking for, hang on, I forgot what we're looking for. We're looking for basically a V shape. Okay, that is what I'm looking for. So I want to see a V shape. That is not a V shape. There's a V shape. Okay, so I'm looking for this particular answer. So it says the first bar on the left is labeled low. By the way, that pops up for the people that are visually impaired who have screen readers. And so it actually makes sure as well that we're interpreting it correctly. So what's the next question? All we have to do is pick it. Okay. So now you're going to do the exact same thing. So you've got driving speed on the horizontal, fuel efficiency on the vertical, and just go on back through. And that is going to be the rest of this section. Okay, it's just different parts. So you'll have to give a little bit more information. This will be a triple stacked bar chart, but you'll just have 3 categories instead of just 2. All right, so that is section 2.4.